Hello, welcome to the latest edition of the TU Sports Extra podcast. We appreciate you joining us. I'm Patrick Prince, joined by University of Tulsa beat writer John Tranchina. This is our little weekly chat where we check in with all things TU football. John, a big one this week. TU goes down to Ole Miss, SEC opponent. But before we get too deep into that game, which we will, let's just talk about the season so far. If I'm a TU fan, how am I feeling about what I've seen so far this year?
Yeah, it's kind of been an up and down 3 games, hasn't it? I mean, you lose a tough one, you win a tough one that you pull out at the end, and then you have a blowout. So I mean, at this point, I think you got to feel pretty good. They've gotten better each game. They have made improvements, and yes, Jacksonville State may have been a lesser opponent, if you will, in the last game, but the way they played in that game, the complete dominance, all aspects of the game playing well, that really leaves you with a good taste in your mouth at this point in the season and gives you some confidence going into a game against a much tougher opponent. But you've seen what they can do, and you know they can do it now. Just getting that out there, I think, is a big deal. Those first 2 games, the roller coaster games, I wasn't really sure what to think we were going to see going into that third one. But after that last game, at this point, I feel pretty good about where they are.
Let's talk about Davis Brin and the offense for a second. They're putting up some really impressive numbers. It's still Davis Brin who had had flashes last year, but also had some struggles. What's different about this year?
Right. Well, I think it's a couple of things. The first thing is he just seems more relaxed. He seems more poised when he has the ball in his hand. It looks like he has, taken a step. They talk about this a lot, where quarterbacks who, once you hit the 10-game mark or whatever of having played, started games and you get the feel for it, and the game kind of slows down a little bit. And it looks like he's in that process where he just has felt and seemed more comfortable. And, it may not seem like a big deal, but, a couple of seconds here and there makes the difference between a bad decision to throw a ball that's going to get intercepted and holding on to it and getting sacked, or finding the next guy, in the flat or whatever. So I think that's been a big part of it. And the other thing I will say is that you cannot overlook how good the receivers have been. You've got Keylon Stokes having a great season. You got Juan Carlos Santana, but you also have the depth guys, the third guys, fourth guys, Malachi Jones and Isaiah Epps. And having all of those guys being able to make catches at crucial moments is crucial. Last year, Stokes missed most of the season with an injury. They had Santana, but they also didn't have as much depth behind him. They had Josh Johnson, who was great too. So they had a couple of guys, but they didn't have that depth of receiver. So I think the combination of Davis Brin, just his maturing process, I guess you could say, and a great group of receivers has really been cool to watch. And it's great to see them getting like national recognition, as they've been at the top of the the leaderboards for the nation the last couple of weeks, and especially now going into a game against a higher profile opponent, more people are getting to taking notice of it. It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about Ole Miss for a second. Last year, John, TU went to Ohio State, and that was a 7-point game at Ohio State,
right,
in the fourth quarter. The final score is very misleading. So TU has proven recently that they can go to a non-conference game and be in contention. How do you see things going down at Ole Miss on Saturday?
I think it's going to be close. I think they will continue that trend. They've had a number of games. I'm actually going to have something that I'm working on right now about their ability to do that, to play well against higher, better opponents. And kind of a string of last year, that especially, and in 2020, they had a number of super close games against high-profile opponents. But yes, I think they can go down there, and part of what fuels them, as I talked about with a couple of the players this week, is this feeling that most of the players at Tulsa were kind of overlooked in the recruiting process by some of the Power 5 conference teams.
Sure.
So when they go to play them, they have a kind of a chip on their shoulder, as they say. They have more motivation to like show these guys like, hey, you should have recruited me. I can play just as good as these guys you have. And that extra fuel seems to, really get them going in games like this. So I think they got a really good chance. Ole Miss, though, is not just any old SEC team. They're actually really good this year, and they've shown a lot too. So it's going to be a tough battle. There's a number of different matchups that could be problematic, but I do believe, at the very least, I think the passing game that we have seen from Davis Brin and those receivers is going to still have some success. Maybe not 400 yards like we've seen the last couple of games, but I think they're going to have a major impact on this game.
This game will come down to what in your mind?
I think it's going to come down to the ability of the TU defense to stop the Ole Miss running game. Mississippi has a lot of powerful backs. They've got two guys who have rushed for, they've got Zach Evans has rushed for 317 yards, and freshman Quinshawn Judkins has rushed for 289. And then they've got a third guy, Ulysses Bentley, who actually played at SMU last year. He even scored a touchdown against TU in their game last year. He's got only 75 yards, but he's got 4 rushing touchdowns. He's more the short yards guy. So that is a very powerful attack. I think they're 5th in the nation right now in rushing. And Tulsa has done a pretty good job against the opponents that they've in the run game, in the opponents they've seen, but this is another level, and they got, it's not just one guy doing it. They've got all of them doing it. And quarterback Jackson Dart is also a good runner too. So even if he can't throw it and they don't hand it off to the running back, you've got the quarterback option. So that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, for TU.
So while the passing game is seemed to be clicking on all cylinders, John, the TU running game has struggled a bit. Can TU win this game not running the ball better than they have been so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer is yes, because the passing game has been so good. Part of it is that the running game hasn't been that great, but part of it also is the passing game has been so excellent. Why wouldn't you keep doing it? So, but yes, the running game has been a work in progress. We still, I know you wanted to mention this, we still don't have Anthony Watkins or Deneric Prince back. They're two of their key guys from last year. Neither of them have played this season yet. We still have no answer as to why they're not even listed on the depth chart. Injury or disciplinary reasons or personal or whatever, who knows? But we don't know. They're not going to tell us, but they're not playing. Jordan Ford did come back he missed the second game. He came back last week and had a pretty good day. And we've still got Steven Anderson has looked pretty good as the main guy so far. 269 pounds. He's going to barrel his way through and get those extra yards when you need them. So he's still going to, I think the way they've utilized the running game has really complemented the passing game. Whenever it looks like a defense may be keen on the passing game, they give Anderson the ball and he rushes for 7 yards, and they've got to then adjust to, all right, you never know when the running game is going to come in, so they've got to account for it, and then they can still throw the ball the next time. And he's been very good down by the goal line. He's got Anderson has 4 touchdowns already this year, and pretty much all of them, I think, have been from within the 5. So he's so to answer your question, yes, I think they can still win with that because they use it judiciously and it's been effective enough. Obviously, it would be to get a better game out of it. It would be great, but I think how they've been able to use it so far has been enough.
Okay. A couple things stood out to you, John, at the weekly press gathering. Why don't you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, there were a couple of interesting personal items come up with the players that were available to us. First was Keylon Stokes, and you may have heard him referred to sometimes by other people in interviews, even Coach Montgomery, as Sleep. So we got to hear, that's his nickname. So we got to hear the origin of the Sleep nickname, which was interesting. And it basically stems from his time as a sophomore in high school, where pretty much the coaches and the older players on the team didn't really know who he was. And then suddenly in tryouts, he's making all these great plays and their coach made a comment like, "We've been sleeping on you." And then they started calling him Sleep. And I guess it carried over from his high school days in Texas to here, and everybody calls him Sleep. So that was one thing. And then the other interesting item was that safety Bryson Powers was there. And if you've talked to him, you can see he has a different feel right off the bat from most football players. He's got a more intellectual bent to his discussions, and he started talking about how he's been into online chess, and he's kind of gotten immersed into the world of online chess. So it was an interesting, and he also started relating something going on in competitive chess that he's been following. But it's an interesting thing. You wouldn't necessarily think of a football player as a chess guy, but Bryson Powers is. So
there you go. Okay. Yeah, interesting stuff. Coach Montgomery, share anything we need to talk about?
A lot of the discussion was about the approach to a more high-profile opponent, about a team that is better than the teams you've played already. He kind of towed the line between kind of dismissing like the idea that this is a better opponent, so you have to prepare differently. They want to prepare the same way. They don't want to approach it as if it's any different than any other game. They all count the same kind of thing. But on the other hand, you can't ignore the fact that this is a better opponent and a more high-profile opponent, and you're going to go to a stadium where it's going to be a different environment than you necessarily are used to. So there's a balance there between how you handle that. But he didn't really want to acknowledge that this is that different of a game than usual, which I can see from a coach's point of view. You don't want to change how you do things. If you keep approaching it the way you do normally, then it stays like a manageable idea. Players won't get too nervous or whatever.
Sure. All right. We'll leave it there this week. We appreciate you checking us out. You can download us for free on Google, Apple, and Spotify, and we'll be coming at you every Thursday. And John, we'll talk next week and recap Ole Miss game.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.